The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to our webinar this week. My name is Tanya, and I'm the Marketing Manager over here at Struxoft Solutions. So just for those of you who are new with us today, MWF or Metalwood Framer is our automated Revit wall, floor, ceiling, and truss framing software for light gauge steel and also for wood modeling. Today's session will be led by our Senior Technician, Christina. Christina will be walking you through how to create MEP shop drawings, including how to create specific elevations and dimensions, how to create MEP schedules, and also how to label MEP. So just before we get going, I want to remind everyone that at the end of the webinar, we'll be taking a few live questions. In order to be selected, please press the raise hand button on the dashboard. Just please also make sure that your mic is working correctly. If you'd prefer, you can also ask questions throughout the webinar in the questions tab of the GoToWebinar dashboard. All right, that's it for me. I'm going to hand off to Christina now.
All right, thanks, Tanya. Hey, everyone, good afternoon. So for today's webinar, I thought I'd keep it pretty simple, and we're just going to touch on the MEP specific options that we have in our shop drawing engine. So for anyone who hasn't really used the shop drawings or has never really touched any of the MEP things, we basically have standalone sheets that you can make just specific to MEP. And you can see here we can do some bill of materials for it. We can label it, get all the dimensions for it automatically. So I thought the goal for today would be to try and recreate this and show you step by step how you can create a separate sheet for just your MEP and have that as a nice little add-in to your regular shop drawings. So just first thing to show off this wall, I've got a pretty simple plumbing wall, MEP wall that you'd probably find in every standard home. Nothing too complicated, just different types of pipes, standard standpipe. I've also added in a few different fittings, a few fixtures as well. And then to mix it up a little bit, I've got some electrical outlets and then just some basic ductwork. So a few different components going on in this one wall. And for us to be able to pick it up and label it and do all the dimensioning, these are just within the bounds of the wall. So within the actual volume of the wall, and that's how we'll be able to pick it up. So there's no special extra step that you really have to take to get these onto a sheet. There's no tagging or anything that you have to do. As long as it's within the confines of your Revit wall, we'll be able to pick that up. So let's go ahead into the Drawings Manager and we'll get started and throw in some different views. So I'll also just preface this by saying that if anyone is using or kind of started with the default shop drawing settings that come out of the box, we do already have it set up for MEP. So feel free to use the defaults as a great jumping off point. It is already set up with a nice broad elevation view, 3D view, and a bill of material. I'm just going to take it a little further today and start creating some separate bill of materials based on the category, but there is already a default set that comes with the standard shop drawings, and majority of it is set up already. So anyone who's new or new to the shop drawing settings, you can essentially make as many sheets as you'd like. So that would really be step one. I've already got one here, but I'll just create a second one. I'll call it MEP2. And basically with that extra sheet, I'm able to associate different view options to different zones on my title block. So we have covered this quite a few times with the shop drawings. You can just go to your sheet layout directory and set up your title block there with all the zones. And then we're just going to pull those zones in And that's how you can start creating your views. So let's create just some basic views to go along with our MEP. So if you do create new views from scratch, one of the first MEP specific ones that we have is the MEP schedule. So it's found in the schedule list, of course, and this is specific to the MEP you're going to have in your panel. And that's exactly how I'm able to create those bill of materials. So for today, I'm going to create a few different MEPs. And like I mentioned, we're going to create them based on the categories of the objects that I have in my wall. So I'll create this MEP specifically for the plumbing. I'll just give this guy a name. And then I can start getting into the view settings. And the view settings are really exactly the same. If you've become familiar with shop drawings a little bit, it's really the same thing regardless of what view you're in. But you'll start off with just your insertion points. So this is exactly how the view is getting inserted into that zone and where it's appearing on the sheet. So bottom left of my view is getting inserted into the bottom left corner of my zone so they can match up. And then you've got a viewport if you want to give your view a name and have that populate on the sheet. I'm just not going to put a title. After that is the layout. Simple enough. It's just the text styles that you want for your headers and for the actual body. And then we get into the data. So this is, of course, where you're going to set up what the actual bill of material looks like. And this is also just a good list of all of the categories that we support that you can use to pull the MEP bill of materials. So most of these I have on my wall, but we do also support electrical equipment, conduits, duct fittings, which I do have in there. So anything on this list is something that we can support, get dimensions to, quantify. Just has to be one of these categories. So again, you can customize the MEP schedule as much as you like. You can create as many schedules as you want. If you do have a very cluttered wall, it might be worth it to just maybe do one for pipes, another one for fittings, another one for fixtures, if you do have a decent amount of them in one wall. But I'm going to keep this to just plumbing. So I'll enable the pipes only. And then it's just a matter of adding in your fields. So it's a pretty simple workflow. And anyone who's used Revit schedules a little bit, it's the exact same idea. You're just adding in the fields that you want to see in your bill of material. So the type, of course, the description. We're going to be able to label these. So the label is going to populate in the bill of material, the quantity, size, and then if the length applies, it'll fill in. If not, you'll just see the word null, like for your pipe fittings, we don't really need the length. So it'll just clear out that value in the table. And that's really it in terms of setting up the fields. You can, of course, organize it, move things up and down. If you want to give the field a different description, in this case, maybe I just want to shorten it a little bit, you can always go ahead and rename what the actual column is going to be. Of course, the alignment, if it hits right, left, or center on that column. And then for the width, you can put in a fixed width, or you can just have it auto-calculate based on the width of the text. So I can add that to my view. It'll populate here in my view options. And then you can go ahead and associate it to your sheet. Put it in maybe one of the zones, and you're good to go. And that's all there really is to it. When it comes to creating the schedule, it's super simple. And like I mentioned, you can create as many one of these, split it up as much as you need to. Or if you don't have a lot going on in that wall, you can just group everything into one big MEP schedule. So that is entirely up to you. So this is really the only specific MEP view that we have, is just the schedule. Everything else for your elevations, if you want a 3D view, it's really just going to be taking the exact same elevation view that you'd use for the framing and just simplifying it a little bit and enabling some certain options so that it's just going to show the MEP, or that it's a bit more specific for the MEP. So if I wanted to create that elevation view like I had on my sheet before, it's the exact same elevation view you'd use for your structural layer, for your sheathing. In this one though, I'm only going to enable the MEP dimension. So the only thing that's going to be actually dimensioned in this view is the MEP. We'll give our view a name, turn that dimension string on. And then of course we want to label everything as well as dimension. So then you're going to turn on the MEP text. So this is what's going to actually use the labeling for quantifying. So everything's just going to get labeled out automatically. Besides that, from here on out, it's exactly the same as you'd set up a regular elevation view. The same insertion points. If you have view templates, you can go ahead and use those. Setting up our scales. Only little thing, of course, pretty obvious, but just make sure that you do have your categories turned on. So if you wanted to obviously see your MEP, you just have to go through this and enable the pipes, the fittings, and all those categories. I just have the singular wall, so for time, I'm going to select everything. But if it's just for MEP, you would go ahead and of course just specify those categories. Last thing, of course, I want to see my structure so I can see them in reference to my studs. And if you did have a sheathing layer or a substrate layer, you can always turn that on as well. So you can see the MEP in reference to your other layers. So all this to say really, even though I'm creating an elevation specific for my MEP, if you did have a larger sheet where you could combine everything and blow up the scale maybe, then you can have your elevation, your MEP, sheathing even, and you can all build that into one cohesive elevation view. So there is that option as well. It doesn't have to be a separate sheet, but this is just maybe a bit of a cleaner way to get everything onto another sheet, so it's a bit easier to read. So that's all there really is to creating the views. I've also got a 3D elevation, or a 3D MEP, excuse me. And if you did want a separate 3D view, showing the MEP. It's the exact same idea. You can kind of turn on specific categories that you would want to see in that 3D view, and then just associate it to the second sheet. So when everything's good to go, you've got all your views that you want to set up. Let's just go ahead and generate this from scratch. But same idea, grab your shop drawings, grab your panel, let your shop drawings run. And this is really how it'll populate without any kind of editing. So you can see that I just did it live. All of my dimensions are toleranced out. That's set up in the view. Everything's labeled. And the dimensions are to the center line of the object. So that's where that little white crosshair is coming in. It's just to show you the reference point that it's using for the dimensions. We've got our little detail views off to the side, or our drafting views, excuse me, of our bill of materials for each type. Little electrical one down there. And then a nice little 3D view that actually shows the MEP. So that is really going to be it for me today, guys. Nice little short and sweet webinar, but I did think it would be useful. It does come out of the box, so feel free to go ahead and use this. And it can be a nice little accompaniment to your regular standard framing shop drawings. So that'll be it for me today. And if there are any questions, feel free to go ahead and ask them now.
Awesome. Thank you, Christina. As she mentioned, we have time to answer a couple of questions. So I'd just like to remind you, if you'd like to pose a question live, please raise your hand now by clicking on the hand icon in the control panel. Just please also make sure that your mic is working correctly. And just while we wait for any questions to come through, I just want to remind everyone again that the recording of the webinar will be sent through shortly. As always, please feel free to share this recording with any colleagues. And if you'd like to set up a one-on-one demo, or if you have any follow-up questions, we highly encourage you to reach out to our team. Our contact details will, for our sales team, will be provided along with the recording. All right, I'm just gonna give it a couple seconds, see if there's any questions. Perfect. Christina, does this also work with linked models?
So that's another great question. So you can always show linked models in your MEP view. It'll come in perfectly fine because it's going to be in your visible categories. The only thing is that for the bill of materials, for the dimensioning, those do have to be live in your Revit model for us to be able to pick up the center lines and everything. So unfortunately, it does just work for the native Revit objects that are in your model. But if you do have anything that's linked, it will at least show it in your elevation and in your 3D, so you can coordinate it with your framing.
Great, thank you. And we just have one other quick question. Just what version of MWF is the most current? And then also, is this workflow available in that version?
Yep. So the most current one that we have, I believe, is build 7674. So it's available on everyone's portals right now. I believe that's the version number or the build number. And yeah, this is completely available in this build. That's the one I'm using right now.
Fantastic. I'm just going to give it a couple more seconds to see if there are any last minute questions that come through. All right, perfect. It looks like that's a wrap for today. So if you have any follow-up questions, please feel free to reach out to us. Our contact information will be available with the recording in just a couple hours. All right, that's it for us. We'll now be ending the webinar. Thank you again to Christina, and thank you to everyone who registered. Have a great day.